All right. Thank you, Sean McCormick, for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Would you be so kind telling us a bit about yourself and your history and what you do?
Yeah. So I am a life coach, performance coach, podcaster, and entrepreneur in personal development. I had a pretty typical sales job in my 20s, and through sort of a series of events, took a huge leap out of the corporate world to open the most successful and most highly rated flotation therapy centers on the West Coast back in 2012. I owned those so I was the founder and then owner operator for 6.5 years, and then sold them over a year ago so that I could focus on the coaching and the podcasting. My podcast is called the Optimal Performance Podcast. And we've had I'm so fortunate to have the guests that I get every single week. It's a weekly podcast that comes out on Wednesdays. And yeah, my bread and butter is coaching one-on-one or consulting with tech companies, running wellness workshops. And my days are focused on being a weird guy that knows a lot of things and helps people.
Cool. All right. I realize now that I should have actually asked you this as the first question, because you usually do that on your podcast. But what have you put in your body today?
So I've had 2 cups of coffee, with black coffee. I've had about an eraser head sized amount of pure Himalayan shilajit. I've had, and you can ask me about that if you want. I've had a teaspoon of ESS 60, which is which is a fullerene, C60, which is a longevity drug. I've had a handful of amino acids and about 3 tokes on a vape pen that has the cannabis strain Bruce Banner number 3, and that's what's in my body.
Cool. Do you feel any effects? I want to ask you about the shilajit later, but do you feel any effects on the working memory of yours when you do cannabis?
On my working memory?
Yeah, short-term memory.
Can you repeat the question? Just kidding. No, I really haven't. And I think for me, I tend to cultivate flow states when I get into work mode. And so sometimes it's a blur anyway. But I am retaining really well. I'm integrating the knowledge that I receive when I'm in my work mode. That doesn't always include cannabis, but no, I've never really felt that it's affected my short-term memory. But I've also done, brain training and stuff to maybe offset that.
Why do you do the shilajit?
I'm sort of experimenting with shilajit. I just came across it. I don't know if you know Siim Land from Estonia.
No.
He's got, dude. Well, good luck with that, because now you're going to watch about 12 hours of this guy. His YouTube channel is insane. He first mentioned it to me, and then I did some reading on it. I take the shilajit because I know from my genetic testing that I need minerals. I need trace minerals. Something that has been suggested to me, and I feel sharper and I feel more physically balanced when I have high levels of minerals in my body. So sometimes I'll do, like a Himalayan salt Soleil. I don't do that every day, but I eat a fair amount of Himalayan salt and the shilajit. It just makes me feel more more balanced physically and mentally.
That's, in my understanding, sort of what you're looking for when you are going into spirituality as well. You're trying to find a balance in your life and maybe just even de-stress. Uh, what is spirituality to you?
Yeah, we could go for a long time on this. Um, Spirituality to me is the understanding and integration with a higher energy than we are. So that can mean a connection with nature. That can mean connection with non-physical energies and spirit guides. That can mean devotion to a god or gods. Spirituality is we are all spiritual beings, every single one of us, whether we want to or not. We came from somewhere and we will go somewhere, and that is inherently spiritual because it involves the spirit. It involves the non-physical Atman, the sense of us that is not our physical body. And so the awareness of that, I think, is spirituality. And yeah, there's lots of different ways to reach states of spiritual awareness. And yeah, there's lots of different things to read or things to do and ways to breathe and ways to sit and abstain. So yeah, it's an important, it runs through every single thing that I do. It is constantly happening with every interaction in my everyday life. And I've cultivated that over time.
Could you elaborate on maybe giving some examples of when in your everyday life that you apply spiritual principles?
Yeah, it starts first thing in the morning with gratitude. We are 1 in 4 trillion chances to be alive. That, the sperm that we were made it. We got it. We win. We're the big winners. That alone, spiritually, is a gift. It's something to be celebrated every single day. And that might sound hokey pokey or whatever, but it's the truth. And starting from that level of gratitude, of grace and appreciation for having this life really sets the tone for the day. Beyond that, being aware of your breath is a way to connect with your non-physical essence because it helps you focus, because it helps you align, and it also elevates your vibration. We are vibratory things. We have a resonance. And when you breathe, it honors that and aligns that. Above and beyond that, some of the stranger things that I do include collaboration in real time with my spirit guides. And there are several of them that have appearances and names and personalities that I have worked really hard to establish and cultivate collaboration with. And so before I do anything, before I go do a thing, before I have a podcast, before I start working one-on-one with a client, I do I call on my crew, my spiritual posse to assist me, to aid me in my endeavors and the things that I do in my life. And so, those are 3 examples of how I, implement spiritual practices to cultivate that for every day.
Can you share a bit more about the experience of connecting and communicating with your spirit guide?
Yeah.
Or spirit guides, sorry.
Yeah. The first time, my first connection with my spirit guide goes back to when I was a kid, and I had a reoccurring dream where I was stuck in like a church cathedral and the doors were locked. And I was really into He-Man. I don't know if you know what He-Man is, if your listeners would know what He-Man is, but he was this like Conan, medieval sort of warrior of good. And there was the bad guy included Thor, and he was like human body, like big buff jack dude with a skull only. And this recurring dream, I would almost get captured by Skeletor and his goons when this figure would step in and like say, hey, the door out is this way, let's go. And it happened really frequently. I didn't know what that was. I didn't know who that was. But it was sort of a fatherly figure that had the same appearance every time. Fast forward 20 years through regular meditation practices, through plant medicine ceremonies and other uses of entheogens and psychedelics, not to mention working with a spiritual teacher who helped me connect more directly with my spirit guide. I began to have waking awarenesses that I was being joined by a presence. Then through meditation sessions, I would establish that connection more. And through seated waking meditation, you get to have this back and forth with this thing that is not you. You're having a conversation. You're having an energetic exchange with this thing that is not you. And then one day I just said, okay, I believe you to be one of my spirit guides. Like, you've been with me my whole life. And he's like shaking his head like, yeah, yep, dummy. And I said, okay, well, now what? So now what? And then it was sort of like he kind of shook his head, and then that sort of engagement was over. But that was validating. I've also had connections with my spirit guides within float sessions. As I'm floating in a float tank, I can see through the top of the tank and see my spirit guide sort of floating above me, guiding, assisting, has a shape and a figure. I could go on and on about this and where their names come from and what they do. I could, but I know that you like to keep things kind of tight. You mentioned in the beginning. So that's when it began. That's when those are two different spirit guides that I connected with. And as the light shines through the window and touches me right now, and they're still with me. I've also done spirit animal capturing connection through a coastal Native American tribal ceremony. And we could go, that could be a whole podcast in and of its own too, but there are ways. There are lots and lots of ways.
Right. And as you mentioned, I'm sure there's lots to talk about on this topic, but I'd like to focus on a specific question, which is, assuming that what you're saying is true, what does that entail for the scientific view of the world, let's say? Do you have any?
How do I think of it in a scientific way?
Right. Can you merge your experiences and the scientific view of the world? Can you have both at the same time, or do you have to give science up in favor of these spiritual experiences of yours?
No, you don't. And the reason that you don't is because there are lots of things we don't know. There are things that we cannot measure because we haven't created the tools to measure them. When I talk to spirituality, when I speak to spirituality with my kids, and I talk about spirit guides and I talk about God, and this is funny. We talk about farts a lot. We talk about how if you can't, can you see a fart? No, you can't see a fart. Can you hear a fart? Sometimes you can hear a fart, Daddy. Yeah, you can hear a fart. Okay, but can you smell a fart? Yeah, Daddy, definitely smell a fart. Well, if you were not around to hear it or smell it, you can't see it. It's still there, right? Yeah, it's still there. It still happens. It's still a thing. Yeah, it's still a thing. Well, that is sort of a really silly, childish way to think of when you begin to answer, when you begin to think about unanswered questions. It certainly allows for energy outside of our frame of reference. We're not using all of our brains. We're capable of measuring and having these experiences You can't say that it doesn't exist because some people are having them. And if we can't measure what's the weight of a spirit guide, what is the message that a spirit guide is giving you, just because we can't measure it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And now we're understanding through the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, Deepak Chopra, Greg Braden, Bruce Lipton, that consciousness keeps everything. That consciousness is the thing that connects all of this. That in order to receive, in order to vibrate at a higher level, to have a spiritual awareness, consciousness is critical and pivotal to that. And consciousness is fucking impossible to measure. It's really tough to pinpoint consciousness. You can talk about neurons, you can talk about neurochemicals, but that's not consciousness. Consciousness is something else. And so there may be a time someday down the road where we can actually measure some of this stuff, but we're not there yet.
Right. You mentioned earlier that you've experienced psychedelics a lot, right?
Yeah.
There have been brain scans, I think, of people doing psychedelics where what is being observed in the brains of people doing psychedelics is actually a lessened activity. Do you think that there is any room for these spiritual experiences within the scientific framework, so that it could all be brains and that it could all be that we haven't lived past lives and that we are going to die when our body dies? Do you still have that possibility? Like, do you still keep an open mind to that, or are your experiences so powerful that you are certain that you've lived past lives, for example?
So speaking to like altered states of consciousness, psychedelic states of consciousness, slowing down or quieting or stopping parts of the brain. And that's true. Psilocybin itself does something. It suppresses the default mode network. And the default mode network is basically your ego. That is the part of your brain that's dictating your ego. I am this, I do this, this is my importance, this is my place in the world, which is an important part of our brain, keeps us alive. But the slowing down of the default mode network through psilocybin isn't a bad thing. It's not a no effect. It's just almost a homeostatic effect to bring you more aligned, to bring you more to a baseline where you're not constantly worrying about what people think of you. So that's speaking to that. When it comes to the question about whether or not I'm open to just being a meat popsicle, and when I die, and my consciousness just goes away, and there's no past lives, there's no reincarnation, there's no spirit. In all of my experiences, which range from ayahuasca and psilocybin and LSD and MDMA and DMT and 600 plus hours in a float tank and meditation since I was 12 and spirit animal recovery, like it doesn't fit within my experience of the world to think that somehow that the reductionist materialist view of life, of sentience, it doesn't align with me. It doesn't fit my experience, my gnosis, my Gnostic view of the world. Now, if when I die nothing happens, then something will still happen. Something will still happen, right? So we'll all get to find that out.
All right. Yeah. I guess, will we Because a lot of people go through life not knowing of their past lives, assuming that past lives have been experienced by most people or all people. So will we know if we get to live another life that we've lived this life?
Okay, so assuming that we do have numerous lives, and that we assume that reincarnation is a thing, and that we have some lessons to learn in this incarnation, we will not know unless we seek it. We are born into a new body, with a new brain, and unless we have the will to understand it, many of us will not know or care to know or think much about it. I believe that as we go through our lives and as we live with purpose on our soul contract, which kind of ties into this, like, I was put here to do a thing. You were put here to do a thing. You had a meeting about it with your spirit guides and the other people that are in your network now, in your life, your mother, your father. You made arrangements that, okay, I'm going to be David. I'm going to be Sean. And in this life, the lessons that I need to learn are about loss or humility or love or perseverance, so that I can elevate my level of spiritual evolution. But if you're not curious about it and you don't think about, maybe that's part of the lesson that you're supposed to inherently learn, is that if you're not curious, you're not going to go anywhere. You're not going to learn anything.
All right. Let's say that someone wants to explore these past lives that they may have experienced. You mentioned psychedelics, meditation, floating. Let's dig a bit deeper into floating. Why and how does that work?
When it comes to having a greater spiritual understanding, having spiritual experiences, and choosing to elevate your spirit, the way that floating helps that the most is by silence. And we are so inundated by information, push notifications, stress, environmental factors, that we're rarely actually taking any time at all to just sit down and shut up and be quiet. So rarely. And meditation is challenging for a lot of people. So the role that floating plays is a way to not only recover, but a way to be alone by yourself with your own thoughts, where you can't run anywhere. You just have to be, capital B, capital E. You can't do anything else in there. And so when you are providing yourself with that time for stillness, for quiet, for contemplation, at a baseline, that's how that works. That's how that helps you become just quieter in your fucking mind and in your heart. At a more advanced level, there are things that you can do in a float tank that I've done, that I've helped other people do, is to astral project, cultivate out of body experiences that are real and memorable. That's one way. Another way is to walk yourself through really important visualization exercises to be your best self. I mean, that's what every successful person you've ever met does really well. They visualize what they want so they can get after it. The same reason you have a podcast right now, the very reason we are, is because you thought of it first. And now you're doing it.
Yeah.
And the float tank is an excellent place to do that, because there's no sound, there's no light. You are floating consciousness inside of a float tank, because you lose connection with your body. And that opens you up to increased awarenesses in other ways in your life, in self-reflection. So there's lots of different uses, but fundamentally it's about stillness so that you can make way for other things.
Would you say that it is possible to reach a an out of body experience even if you're not floating? And could
Yes.
you, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
could you please paint a picture for our listeners of the effort that would have to be put in to achieve astral projection for a meditation practice in comparison with floating or maybe even psychedelics?
Yeah. For me, so everybody has to start with reading the book Demystifying the Out of Body Experience by Luis Minero. It is the best resource I've seen in how to do it, why you should do it, what might be going on while you're projected. And the most fundamental aspect of the how to astral project, well, it happens when you sleep at night. That's when you leave your body. Your psychosoma, your non-physical self, leaves your body anyway when you sleep. You literally detach from your physical body to create that space for your body to rest and for your consciousness to explore other states. The day-to-day practice to reach those levels of consciousness involve what's called VELO, VELO. It's an acronym: voluntary energetic longitudinal oscillation, which is to send energy up and down your body, to track, to be conscious of sending energy up and down your body, to be processing energy through your chakra systems, and to have the intention that I'm doing this. I'm literally elevating my vibration physically and spiritually so that when I go to sleep tonight, I will be able to project out of my body. If you're overweight, it's harder. If you're drunk every day, it's harder. If you're high every day, it's harder. If you are easily distracted, it's harder. So will has a massive, it's most of the work is the will to project. And then as you prepare in the evening time, you put your body in a certain posture, you get your breath right, you do your thing, you get into your this VELO, voluntary, energetic, longitudinal, meaning up and down, oscillation, north to south, up and down, sending body energy up and down your body so that when you go to sleep, you will project with recall. You'll know that you've projected out of your body. And that's different from lucid dreaming where you're having orgies with people. This is like a conscious detachment of the consciousness from the body.
Right. I'm not sure that it answered the question I was meant to ask, or rather that I was interested in getting to know the answer of. How much effort would someone need to put into, let's say, this form of VELO that you mentioned, or floating, or any other method of astral projection? How much efforts are needed usually for people to receive or achieve these states of astral projection?
It takes a while. It takes a while to develop. For floating, it's actually harder because you're not necessarily going into a float session in a float tank to sleep. And sleeping is the easiest way to have an out of body experience. But when you are cultivating a practice centered around astral projection at night, it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of time. More than anything else, it takes consistency. You need to be consciously aware while you're cleaning your room, you're doing this energetic exchange. You're conscious of this process that you're doing. Weeks, months before certainly weeks, likely months of doing this literally all the time, where you have a projected experience with recall, because that's the thing, because we project anyway. Most of us, we all do to some extent, but to actually project and be aware that you're projected, it takes a lot of practice. And also, the way that these all sort of work together is that when you're having a meditation experience and you get distracted by something, how easily are you able to focus your attention back to your meditation, back to your breath, back to your mantra? That's what meditation is going back to a place of centeredness. That ability applies in psychedelic states too. If you're having a bad trip and you're spinning out and you somehow think that you're being chased by demons, how can you get your shit back together so that you can stay calm, so that you can be in control of that experience? Same way for astral projection. When you're projecting out of body, when you have a projection, how capable are you of keeping it together so that you don't go, whoa, oh my God, and because that will end it. That will end that experience. It will snap you back into your body. It will keep you from elevating that state of consciousness. So being able to be okay when things get squirrely or when things get amazing, keeping a balance is fundamental. And it takes a lot of practice.
Right. Would you say that it is easier with floating or meditation? Like both are going to be hard and take a lot of practice, but is there any difference between which method you? Mm-hmm.
Most of us don't have float tanks at our house or have, free access. So, just the sheer logistics of being able to cultivate like a 3 or 4 time a week flotation therapy practice is one thing. So that inherently makes meditation and sleeping easier to get into projected states. It really does require you to either be in a theta state of consciousness or fully asleep. And that is easier to do when you're sleeping. And it also creates a rhythm for you so that you're going to go to sleep every night. And part of your exercise of going into sleep states is to have the intention of projecting out of body. That is going to be more repeatable. It's going to be more reliable and more consistent than a float practice or a meditation practice, I assume. So in that way, it's more streamlined and more regimented.
Mm. I know that you have a floating, what do you call it? Floating location, floating
center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess that's one way of helping other people that you engage in, because it's helped you a lot. How does that make you feel, helping other people, and does that relate in any way to your spiritual guides? Have they shown you how to? Mm-hmm. Please tell me.
Yeah, you're onto it. Yes, in order to, so the origin story of starting a float center was an awareness that I wanted to be of service. I wanted to serve. I wanted to help people. Now, 6 years down the line, we've had over 50,000 people use a business that I created. What the purpose of that mission is that when you are in service of others, that's not only good for your karma, it's not only good for humanity, but what happens is it creates this loop. As you serve, you add more value. As you add more value, you become higher priority. As you become higher priority, it increases your money. It increases love in your life. It increases focus and vision and purpose. And it elevates your spiritual self to act in service. If you think about it, that's what we're all doing. We're creating value for others. And in creating value for others, it increases our value. It's reciprocal. It's the law of attraction. It's the law of abundance. As we continue to contribute in a meaningful way, in a logistical way, it elevates our spiritual selves. It elevates our spiritual lives. I'm constantly asking myself, how can I be useful to people? Like agreeing to do this podcast with you was like this. I don't know you. It's a new podcast, but I'm going to be able to provide a value to this guy. I'm going to be able to provide a value to his listeners, And in so doing that, in actually showing up in the world in that way, even though there's other things that I could be doing right now, what I'm doing is I'm contributing to that two-way road of me giving value and then getting value back, me giving value and getting value back. And that creates an evolution and an increase in your life mission, and service value is all part of that.
What is your life mission?
My life mission is to elevate consciousness so that people may know themselves better, make better decisions, and make the world a better place.
I like it.
That's what I'm here for. And I've discovered that through the ways that I've described earlier. Like, that's what I was here to do. I like doing it. It pays my bills. It's fucking fun. It's interesting. It allows me to be as weird as I want to be and say the things that I want to say. That mission it gives me universal purpose. It amplifies everything that I do.
Yeah, I mean, I can attest to that as well. Having a purpose in life is really life-changing. If you don't know what you value the most in life and how your day-to-day life connects to something greater than the specific task at hand, then that task at hand is going to feel very boring. And yeah, I mean, it could feel very fun as well. As you mentioned, you think that your work is fun, but I think that having a life purpose can definitely help people a lot.
Yeah. That's what I do for people. That's the big idea in my coaching practice, is to align people with that, to find strategic ways to make that their life, to vibrate along that line. Whether you want to work a 9-to-5 or not, whether you want to be an entrepreneur or not, how can you align with that so that your life is more interesting and more meaningful? That's everything.
So where can our listeners find you if they want to learn more about your coaching practice?
Yeah, you can go to my website, which is seanmccormick.com, SeanMccormick. You can follow me on Instagram, where I'm pretty active. That's real Sean McCormick, spelled obviously the same way. Those are the best places. And the guests that I cultivate for my podcast on the Optimal Performance podcast are all centered around helping people and creating value for their life. So if that's nootropics, cool. If that's recovery, cool. Gut health, sleep, time management, longevity drugs, they all feed that same purpose. And so, yeah, that's where people can learn more about all the stuff I do.
Well, we'll link to those places in our show notes. Last question of the day. How do you use nootropics in your life, and what function do you think that they serve in your life?
You know, I've been experimenting with nootropics for almost 10 years. First with the racetams, then modafinil, then some more common sort of alpha GPC, and then, on from there. The way that I like to use nootropics now are task specific and mood specific. So if I have a lot of writing to do, I'll take some acetylcholine brain food. If I have studying to do, I'll use Siltep. If I am going to be working on a specific project for a very long time, I might use modafinil. It's very case by case. I have an evening stack that I take every single night because it helps me sleep and helps me feel energized in the morning. And so it's all mood specific. What I don't do anymore is just take handfuls and handfuls of everything and hope that I just kick ass all day. It's become more optimal for me to have better baselines and understand where I'm at and use other ways to grow my consciousness and my cognitive abilities, and then supplement that for task or mood.
So most of the nootropics that you mentioned are stacks, right?
Yes.
And where can people learn more about them?
Yeah. Naturalstacks.com is where it's a company that I work alongside with the podcast, and their products that I've been taking, for a long time. And that's where they can learn about a lot of the nootropic stacks that I take.
Cool. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast, Sean.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.